Greetings, respected viewers. This video is going to be an introduction to the Northern Ireland Troubles, and it's probably the first lecture you've ever seen anyone deliver whilst wearing nothing but a wife beater. That's this sort of vest, which was very popular in Northern Ireland during the conflict. Anyhow, so we're looking at Northern Ireland, which is 6 counties, part of the United Kingdom, then as now. And it's a conflict over whether Northern Ireland was to remain within the United Kingdom or leave and join the Republic of Ireland. So, the island of Ireland consists of 32 counties, 26 which are in the Republic of Ireland, having their capital at Dublin, 6 of which comprise Northern Ireland with its capital at Belfast. The Troubles was usually taken to break out in 1969, though there were a few eruptions in the years leading up to that, and ended probably in 1998 with the Good Friday Agreement, though that's properly called the Belfast Agreement. The Republic of Ireland had been part of the UK until 1921, at which point it seceded and went its own way. That's where I'm from. The Irish Constitution, promulgated in 1937 in Articles 2 and 3, stated that the national territory consisted of the whole of Ireland, which was to include Northern Ireland, and said that it was an imperative for any government to try and regain this territory. So it's a little bit about the geography. So Northern Ireland, part of the UK. UK consists of Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland and England. England is by much the biggest of those in terms of population. Nowadays, with over 80% of the population, it was a bit less back then, 50% of the territory. So Northern Ireland had about 1.5 million people at the outset. There are different identities in Northern Ireland. Most people call themselves British. Quite a few people call themselves Irish. Some people call themselves both British and Irish at the time. Some people said they were Ulster, because there's Ulster, which is the northernmost province of Ireland. Properly used, Ulster actually means 9 counties, not just the 6 counties which make up Northern Ireland. Some people there would call themselves Northern Irish. So it's very complex. They're overlapping identities. So the key issue is, do you wish to stay within the United Kingdom or to join the Republic of Ireland? Northern Ireland being independent of both didn't seem to be an option in 1969, though it was briefly mooted later. So onto the political parties. Well, the largest party in Northern Ireland at the time was the Ulster Unionist Party. They call themselves Unionists because they support the Act of Union, which took effect on New Year's Day 1801. That's what united Ireland and Great Britain. And so they wished to maintain the union between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. As you know, the major portion of Ireland had left the UK in 1921. There were a few other parties on that side, but people are called Unionist if they want Northern Ireland to stay within the UK. Other people were nationalist, and then there was the Nationalist Party, who wished to take Northern Ireland out of the United Kingdom and unite with the Republic of Ireland. It gets a bit confusing, because if you talk about unity, you mean with who? You mean with the Republic of Ireland, or you mean with Great Britain? Right, so it gets more complex than that, but this is just an introductory lesson. Now, hardline Unionists were often called Loyalists, and they were emphatic about their loyalty to the British monarchy, and for many of them, they felt that was coterminous with being Protestants. Incidentally, virtually everybody in Northern Ireland was a Christian at the time. So the 2 major dominations were Protestant, and they were a majority, about 65% at the outset, and the rest were Roman Catholics. Catholics, we generally skip off the word Roman and just say Catholic. So Unionists in almost every case wanted to be part of the UK. Catholics, about 95% of whom wanted to be part of the Republic of Ireland. It was a study by an American sociologist, Paul Rose, just before the Troubles broke out, and he concluded 5% of Catholics voted for the Unionist Party. So Northern Ireland had devolution within the United Kingdom, as she does today. So there was Stormont. Stormont is the Parliament building just outside Belfast, and people were elected as members of Parliament to Stormont to govern the internal affairs of Northern Ireland: education, housing, employment, running the police. That's called the Royal Ulster Constabulary, RUC, and a few issues like that. But Northern Ireland being part of the UK, foreign affairs and defence were handled from London. Northern Ireland was elected by 12 MPs to go to Westminster in London, that Parliament, to deal with matters for the whole UK. There are 42 Stormont MPs they're in Northern Ireland dealing with Northern Ireland only matters. It gets a bit complicated, but the two sorts of MP are not the same person. One person's going to London and one person's staying in Belfast, and they don't represent the same geographical territory exactly, because for Westminster purposes, Northern Ireland was divided into 12 constituencies, but for Stormont purposes, it was divided into 42 constituencies. And then there were local councils. We know there are 6 counties. Obviously, there was Belfast City Council as well. So a county, or indeed a city, is divided into wards, and a council is elected by the wards. Oh, sorry, there was Derry had its council as well. So this was quite a controversial issue, the way the wards were divided up, because, as you know from politics almost anywhere, the electoral boundaries make a big difference to the viability of a party being elected. Now, the Ulster Unionist Party was the largest party, but there was the first past the post system, as is the UK. I won't go into that, that would be a bit of a tangent, but that gave an advantage to the largest party. And the way the boundaries were drawn was highly tendentious. And many people say that the Boundary Commission wasn't independent and was partial towards the Unionist Party, which had been the ruling political party in Northern Ireland since Northern Ireland's devolution started in 1921. And in Derry, a Unionist minority elected a Unionist majority in the City Council. It's more complicated than that because people were only allowed to vote at the age of 21 until 1970. There was large-scale Catholic emigration. A lot of people left the country before they could vote. In the local level, only householders and the spouses of householders were allowed to vote. So if there's a man and a woman who are a married couple, own the house or rent the house, they're allowed to vote. Any other adults living there were not allowed to vote for local council elections, but they were permitted to vote for Westminster elections. So the Catholic community was poorer per capita than the Protestant community, not by a huge amount. So some Catholics were disenfranchised for local elections, not for Westminster elections. Anyway, the police force, the RUC I mentioned, was there, and it was largely Protestant, over 90%. And there were some part-timers called the B specials who did an ordinary job, but one day a week or one afternoon a week or so, B specials would come out and do policing duties, but they didn't have full police training. And they were exclusively Protestant, not by rule, but that's the way it happened. I should have mentioned the Loyal Orders, incidentally. So there was a Protestant religious and political organisation called the Orange Order, and they would meet in buildings called Orange Lodges, and they tended to be ardent Unionists, and some of them were prejudiced against Catholics. Now the B Specials, that's the part-time police, they sometimes held their training sessions in Orange Lodges. So the Catholic community generally had a negative opinion of the Orange Order. The Orange Order took the name from William of Orange, that's William III. I won't go into that, that would be miring the lecture. Anyway, so the B Specials were pretty unpopular amongst the Catholic and nationalist community. There was no rule against Catholics joining it though. So Terence O'Neill was the Prime Minister of Northern Ireland at the time. He was born in London to parents from Northern Ireland. He came from an upper class family. He went to Eton. He was an officer in the Irish Guards. That's a regiment in the British Army, and the officers then there tend to be very well got in that regiment. But he perceived the need for reform, possibly because the UK Prime Minister, Harold Wilson, pressured him to do so. 1/3 of Northern Ireland's budget came from Westminster. Northern Ireland was the poorest region of the United Kingdom. And quite a few Labour MPs in the UK Parliament had said, you've got to improve things because there's discrimination against the Catholics. You've got to shape up or we're going to cut your subsidy. So it might have been, in principle, he wished to appeal to more Catholics, as he said, or it might have been that he was worried about the subsidy from London being reduced. And along came a rabble-rouser called the Reverend Ian Paisley, who'd set up his own church, the Free Presbyterian Church. He was an evangelical Protestant, and he stood for election as a Protestant Unionist, as opposed to an Ulster Unionist. Of course, Catholics were allowed in the Ulster Unionist Party. Only one was ever elected to Stormont, and Paisley unseated O'Neill, took O'Neill's North Antrim seat. But I'm jumping ahead of myself a bit. The background, so since the mid-60s, there'd been a campaign to improve the lot of the Catholic minority. John Hume was a leading light in that. Hume came from Derry. He was a Catholic himself. He'd even spent time at the Catholic seminary near Dublin, Maynooth. He wasn't ordained a priest. He was a teacher and he began to raise awareness of social justice issues and to get people protesting. But he was a pacifist. He was a nationalist in outlook, but he didn't push that issue. National identity was not important to him. As he said, you can't eat a flag. His father had been in the British Army, so he wasn't necessarily hostile to the British Army. Right, so that's enough for this introductory lesson.